If you want to learn, you have to first listen.
Welcome to episode 27 of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know, a podcast to feed our curious minds. I'm Matt O'Donnell, and I want to know who you are, I want to know what you do, I want to know what the makeup and material requirements for wood are for you to be able to knock on wood. Does particle board count? Cardboard? A ream of paper? Like, what are we talking about here? I just want to know how I'm helping myself out when I use superstitions. I want to know what matters to you and why. I've spent the past 15 years as a professional bass player. You know, this show has been around for over a year now, just over a year, and I need to know if I should be updating that number. I'm going to explore that and report back. I've covered a lot of miles and talked with a lot of people. I've found that the person deeply interested in a topic is often more interesting than the topic itself, and the bigger picture is found in the details. That makes for a fantastic excuse to share conversations with people who I think are great. Today on the show, you will hear my chat with keyboard player, producer, musician, all-around good fella, thinker, lovely guy, Aaron Smith. We will get to that in just a moment, but I just wanted to say thank you for hanging with me through the holiday season and the first one of the year. As you heard, there were definitely challenges in wrangling guests, making sure episodes could come out on time, weather restrictions that made it difficult to get back here in time to record episodes, all kinds of things. So we kind of went through a little bit of a stressful time, but we're back. We're back. And if I'm being honest, I'm not going to tell you who or what, because that's not really what I do. I don't know why, but I'm not ready to break tradition yet. I am sort of set up with what I think is an embarrassment of riches of guests that are already recorded as you're hearing this and things that I'm going to record in the next week or so. So I'm going to be set up for quite a while. So there should be no hiccups coming up. I had a friend who decided that she wanted to do some magic spell for the success of the show. And I have kept waiting to see when that tsunami was going to come in. And I wasn't sure what it was going to look like. Maybe that's a thing, right? With a magic or something like that, a divine intervention, that you're not sure what it's going to appear like when it happens. And maybe going through that patch of uncertainty with guest taping is now being paid back in having some great guests lined up that I'm very excited about. But yeah, in a lot of ways, that last episode that you heard with Amanda O'Donnell and Dave Jacquin was the beginning of year 2, looking back at year 1. And so now with this talk with Aaron, we are kind of officially into year 2 and we're running, we're doing it, we're running, we're jumping, we're throwing, we're making it happen. When I wandered onto the Sara Evans tour bus in August of 2021 as a last minute call to take the weekend of gigs, one of the people I met right away was Aaron Smith, and for the next 2 touring cycles around the moon, sun, whatever, he was the guy on keys over to my right. And what an exciting time that was. Aaron is a super talented, intuitive, smart, thinking musician who's kind of always paying attention to what's going on around him and playing with some other musicians who do that thing, which is what I like to do, really helped make that touring experience something special for the time that we were doing it together. In this discussion, I say some things about how when a gig moves out of your life, it's only really a disappointment if you don't get anything out of it that goes forward with you into life. And since the time that we stopped playing together on the road all the time, Aaron and I have been involved in a few other projects, including the band Boss that we are in together that is sort of an offshoot of a chunk of musicians of that band, and our buddy 007 Tim Buell on the drums. Aaron currently plays auxiliary keyboard for the contemporary Christian artist Michael W. Smith, who is a legend, and it's super exciting that Aaron has that gig. He is sort of made for it, and when I heard that's what he was going to move on to do, I thought, God, that makes total sense. Oh, I should also mention that Aaron is doing the keyboard work on the intro and outro music for this very podcast. So when you hear that nice twinkly piano outro when I wrap up at the end, that is all Aaron. You know, if I'm being honest, that was a really dependent on Aaron track. The rest of everything was built around his piano part, which was based on some stupid, simple rhythm and bass thing that I had given him. He kind of totally knocked it out of the park and made it very easy for the rest of us to add on to. So listeners of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know should be grateful to Aaron in perpetuity for those sweet keys licks. This is a great talk. We get into all kinds of things about Aaron's personal history, his professional history, our sort of shared figuring out of a path towards knowledge and how to be okay with not knowing everything about everything, something that is really dear to my sanity at this moment in time, this season, what have you. Just sort of yet another time that I am amazed by when people sit down with me, that we end up having these meaningful chats and there's always something to be taken away from it. I hope that you guys out there are getting as much out of them as I am, because I am loving all of them. So now I will take you to my chat with Aaron Smith.
You know, it's weird. I have gotten used to hearing my voice singing in headphones, but not talking. It's really strange.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're used to it. How many episodes are you in now? Like 15, 20, 25?
Yeah, let's call it about 25. I think this will be 27. And there's a couple like non-officials in there. So yeah, it took me a while, and by a while, I mean like a lifelong journey to being okay with hearing my voice on a recording.
Mm-hmm.
I was not into it for a long time. And then when I went and did that Music Row Hideout podcast, I heard it back. I've never listened to that whole thing because I thought that I would be cringy about it. But everything that I heard, I was like, I like that. And
You've never listened to the whole thing?
No.
Are you ever going to?
Maybe. I remember
your
things.
90th birthday.
I remember for the most part what went on there in terms of me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that depending on how this went when I started recording, that I would have feelings and that I was probably going to end up like trying to like hit up Ryan and be like, hey, what'd you do EQ wise for my voice? Because it sounded really, and then honestly, it sounds really good, you know, just with the couple things that I do. That's the other thing too. Sometimes you just got to make decisions about what is going to be, what's going to get through and what's
It'll
not.
just be like John Bonham's kick pedal, you know? It's like, it becomes a part of the...
What did I just say to John the other day about, he was talking about needing to get an SM7 because he's having trouble tracking vocalists who have no mic technique on like, you know, a large diaphragm condenser mic. He was like, I think I'm just going to need to start tracking vocals on a 7B and they'll be good results. They won't be as incredible, but you won't have to worry about endless plosives and like volume inconsistencies and all this kind of stuff. But I said, though, I do have a super soft spot for in the Beyonce song Deja Vu, after the Jay-Z rap, when she does like this bridge, she clips the hell out of the microphone. And it's cool to me because it's just like, the take was better than the need for it to be clean.
Yeah.
And like once you hear it, you can never unhear that it just distorts. Like she just gets to an intensity that she just, is overloading the mic. But it's cool. You just are only allowed like a couple of those per decade of things that are like just leave it in mistakes. I heard something about Amy Winehouse the other day. I was watching the Amy Winehouse classic albums again. I think it was Salam Remy said that there's a song where if you solo her vocal, you can hear like her tea kettle whistling. And like that she just didn't care, but like you'd never hear it in the track. But like if you solo it, you can hear this tea kettle just in the background.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make it through. That's not quite the same as like the Beyonce thing, but like.
Yeah, but that's a fun Easter egg though.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's also a bunch of kick pedal stuff in Superstition. One time, because I'm salty this way, I made a just vocal, bass, and drums mix of Superstition using the multi-tracks. And if you just get the drums in there, you can hear all kinds of like squeaky kick pedal stuff.
Yeah.
But you know what I love though, as we transition to doing any kind of thing resembling an actual conversation here, is I love piano recordings where you can hear the pedals.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about that that's really cool, because if you're sitting in a room with someone playing a piano, you're going to hear the pedals.
Right.
Like especially like the dampers come on and off. And so when that's in like a solo piano and vocal recording, it feels much more real. That's the thing I like. Like I always have time for pedals piano pedals making it into things.
Yeah. And, that's why every software piano manufacturer tries to have the, adjustable levels now for like hammers, the pedal noise, the noise when the dampers come off the strings. So it all, I don't know.
I mean, that makes sense. I don't use a whole lot of like great piano synth, but that makes sense that they would want to have like control over that.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about all the piano VIs, and there's great ones out there. I use Spectrasonics Keyscape for a lot.
Yeah.
Another one that was really popular and it probably still is the Unicorda. Native Instruments. That came out like 10 years ago, maybe even longer. And I remember just being beside myself with excitement when that came out. Like, this is such a cool, like I listened to all the demos on the Native Instruments website. Yeah. And like, oh, think of how much cool stuff I can do with this. And then that's all anyone used for 5 years. Yeah. And it just wore it out. And it's like, this all sounds, it's to the point where I can pick it out in like less than 5 seconds of hearing a recording with it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Unicorda. And almost a similar thing as like Valhalla Shimmer, where it's like, we know what that is now.
Yep.
So it's like the man behind the curtain has been revealed. I don't know. My friend, do you know Chris Leidecker?
No.
He plays drums with me on the road.
Oh, cool.
With Michael.
Yeah.
And he has a studio over in Donaldson. Really cool place. He's got a upright Boston that he did his own prepared piano kind of thing.
I love that.
He just built this like wooden bar that sets into these brackets that he put on top of the piano, and it's got these like paperclip things like the top of a clipboard.
Yeah.
And he just clips felt into it, and it just slips right in, so you can just like take it out and it's normal piano, and you can put it back in and it's felt piano. But listening back to recordings of that, because I got to record on it last summer at some point, it's everything that all of those felt piano plugins are trying to be. It's like you've got your
that's cool
super textural hammer sound, the pedal sound really comes through, but it's real.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, it just makes me kind of not want to ever use VIs anymore.
Yeah.
But I feel like all of those kind of have a shelf life of like,
of course, this
will blow up for 3 years and then we'll all be tired of it. At least that's how I feel about it.
Sure. And I mean, especially in Keys land, I mean, you're dealing with that to a great degree, in a very like intricate degree. I think that's true about so many things. I don't know. I would like to live maybe in a world of less trendiness that way. Or like, I would love it if the floodgate opened and there was no reason to use the hot instrument. Like it could be a tool for the right time, but I am skeptical of any recording situation, especially that you like pull up default sounds.
Sure.
Like when that happens, I'm just sort of like, oh, okay, well, this will show its age at some point. And everything does to some degree, but I always think that is the mission, is to not age something out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like the more you can refine your individual, like, I mean, unless you like create your own instrument from scratch,
Right.
It's like you're always going to be using a part of what someone else, some other person or company created.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I think that the soft music manufacturing industry is like a bigger role in music production, like music just creation overall, than probably most people realize.
Yeah.
Because it's influencing all the tools that we use on an everyday basis. So like guitar pedals to like software plugins, everything.
So
it's like
sample libraries that it's like, oh, this guy has done some production for Drake. So if you're trying to make a Drake style trap beat, like, why not use the samples that like this guy?
It's a really effective marketing tool.
Sure, of course it is. And I mean, that's really all there is, right? Is like marketing. This is an interesting concept. I wish I wasn't so detached from the average musician hobbyist sometimes, because I always wonder what that's like. And in my best moments, maybe, I don't think they're my worst moments, I try and remember that gear companies don't sell the majority of their things to professionals.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Professionals are such a minority, but we have to use the same products, and that's why you see people who figure out how to route things 30 different ways using like common objects.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very MacGyver situation all the time to use something that you can't replicate the sound of another way.
Yeah.
Oh, so all that to say, like, it's all marketing, because, how else are you going to get the guy who works, at the Gap until 9 and then goes home and works on beats? Like, what do you do for that guy? And it's like, oh, you sell him a library from some producer that is working on a bunch of Ty Dolla $ign records, and then you're like, oh, cool, that's what kind of stuff I want to make. I should grab that dude's hi-hat.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently.
No, I mean, great hip-hop. Like, I just was watching, I've been really listening to a bunch of A Tribe Called Quest lately, because last week I watched the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions and watching their induction and stuff. But like, I think that's one of the great misnomers about hip-hop, is we still don't know as a whole how to recognize that people were using their parents' vinyl collections as instruments.
Right.
And basically making collages, and that's how like that happened. But, using that as an instrument rather than, I'm trying to not use a word that we use now so freely, but something like resampling, right? Like that samples is exactly what it is. Like that didn't exist before then.
Sure.
To sample something besides mellotrons.
Yeah.
And so
when I look at it that way, I think that's one of the most creative, like, musical advancements that was made in the last, 60, 70 years.
Yeah. All right. I was thinking about when I knew that you were a real one, and because I can remember this moment.
Am I a real one?
Yeah.
Am I a real boy?
Yep, you sure are. I know, we talked about this, and so now you're going to get weird. But no, it was the first time that I played on the Opry, and you got to meet Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, did you witness that spectacle?
Oh, yeah. I was right. Like, I was sitting in the dressing room, and it happened like right outside the door. And so I just watched, because I think that you got the assignment right, in terms of like meeting someone who is a hero to you that way.
Yeah.
Everyone, especially in this town, wants to try and like play stuff off in those moments, like be cooler than the moment, like keep it together. And you did, but it was also clear that it was a long time like effect, that like the position you were in was made possible by, you know, like that person's work. And so like, how are you not going to like show some excitement out of that?
Well, I feel like I should give your listeners some background as to this encounter you're speaking of. So so it was when we were playing at the Opry. I don't know, this was several times in, I think at this point, several Opry performances.
It was my first.
So it was your first one.
I don't know how many you'd done before that. With Sarah.
Yeah, a few probably. I mean, I think she probably still does like half a dozen or so a year, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
So our next door to our dressing room was Stephen Curtis Chapman's dressing room. And I grew up on Christian radio. Like, that's what I listened to. That's what my parents listened to. So I listened to Stephen Curtis Chapman a lot, along with a lot of other contemporaries. I had never gotten a chance to meet him. I think we had been at the same like festivals a couple times while I was playing for Christian artists. We just never had a chance to meet. I think I saw him in passing at an airport one time at like 6 a.m. in Phoenix, Sky Harbor. Like not the time to go say hello. So it was actually my buddy who is Steven's, I guess, guitar tech or production manager. He wears a lot of hats over there. Found me at that event, and he was like, "Hey, I want you to come meet Steven." And so
that's right. I forgot that somebody
he introduced me. I probably wouldn't have gone up just out of the blue uninvited, but yeah, he was just real friendly and pleasant, and I had thought about this moment for my entire life. And I literally, it was when his record came out in, I think it was either 99 or 2000, called Live Out Loud. And there was a song on that record called No Greater Love. And it was a story about Nate Saint, who is like a missionary pilot who like flew into the bush to like bring the gospel to people, like, you know, indigenous people who had never, you know, had that exposure to Christianity. And he and his compadres died doing that. And so he wrote a song about it. And at the end of the song, he had someone from the tribe who had converted to Christianity as a result of Nate Saint and his friends' missionary efforts. I don't remember how he found this person, but he had him come to the studio and just sing like in his like tribal musical style.
I've never heard this, which is interesting because that record was prime like short window that I would have been really into that music too.
Okay.
Yeah, that like 97 to like 01. Basically, I mean,
I didn't know you too had a Stephen Curtis Chapman phase.
Just kind of the hits, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely heard that record, or I would think that I did, and I didn't.
Yeah, it wasn't a single or anything like that.
Maybe I only know that song from playing it in, you know, some band at the time.
Well, anyways, I heard that I think the closing bit was like they didn't play the track or anything for this guy in the studio. They were just like, hey, just sing something.
Yeah.
And he sang this like chanty thing, and it ended up being in the key of the song that they just like turned on the all the other tracks and were like, oh, this fits perfectly. Yeah. So they just like shipped it off to mix that way. And cool. And I heard that and I was like, you know, if I could meet one person, you know, the people ask you like, if you could have lunch with like one famous person, who would it be and why? And I'm like, Stephen Curtis Chapman, because he writes awesome songs with amazing stories. And so I had all that pent up inside me for 25, 30 years, and it all came rushing out all at once
in 30 seconds.
I think his face at the end of my monologue there was one of like delight, but also a little shock and horror at, I don't know, not horror, but he was a little bit like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa, man. And he was just like, okay, thank you. And I'm like, inside I was thinking, sorry, man. Yeah. Sorry. I would totally fanboy to you.
Yeah. I've told this story on the show before, but I think I'm still at a point where I can like tell abridged versions of things that have already come up. But I met Lin-Manuel Miranda last year.
That's awesome.
For a second. And it was at a show at the American Legion. It was Ifo Donovan and Hawktail. Amanda and I are sitting there, and I had heard that he was in town, but I wouldn't have thought that he'd show up to a show like that. we're sitting there in the set break, and I kind of like turn around in my chair to like look in the back of the room, and there's Lin-Manuel Miranda standing there with like a couple friends. And Amanda was like, "Are you going to go talk to him?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "I don't want to, like, it didn't feel like the right thing." And then I was like, "I don't know, maybe I should." And I hemmed and hawed for 2 minutes. Much like you, I had thought about this for a long time because I have one tattoo and it's a Hamilton lyric. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I really thought I needed to thank you for this awesome tattoo idea." And then he looks at my arm and he goes, "What?" And then like proceeds to be like, "I have to take a picture of this." So somewhere living in like Lynn's phone is a picture of my arm. But like,
and you know that that facial recognition is going to evolve to a point where it's going to recognize your arm.
100%.
Is this Matt O'Donnell?
Yep. I mean, I'm sure I posted about it when I got the tattoo at some point. So like, if the AI has scraped the socials enough, it has found that. And when they hack into his phone, then when there's that Lin-Manuel Miranda iCloud leak,
Yeah. Then you'll rise to infamy.
I'm gonna get doxxed. We just laughed for a second, and I was like, "Cool. I hope you have a great rest of your night," and like walked away. But yeah, I mean, we each told a story there, but it was really illustrative of me asking like, or saying that in that moment, I think that I knew that you were like the right kind of person to be like, "Oh, I value this kind of person in a setting," like the right amount and wonder, because I also think I refuse to stop being a fan of music because I do it.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many of those people that are only the professional version of themselves after a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if I can't like put on a record and feel a sense of wonder when it hits me the right way, then like, what am I doing this for?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and first of all, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. With that whole Stephen Curtis Chapman moment, I don't know. I guess maybe I've hit a point where I'm not really that worried about how I'm coming off in that moment. I don't want this to sound like I'm saying I've arrived at this place where I don't care what anyone thinks and I'm not anxious about that, because that's definitely not true, at least not all the time.
You're not consumed by it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was telling a story to someone just yesterday about a situation that I heard a mutual friend of ours was in, and I said, "Yeah, that's really funny, but if it had been me, I'd be mortified. I wouldn't leave my house for a month knowing that this is how someone reacted." And that's not to say that I have less of a handle, obviously not compared to you. I'm not concerned about having more or less of a handle, but to think that I have no handle on that at all. Like,
yeah,
I feel very much the same way, where it's like, oh, okay. Like,
well, I think in an industry like music, and there's definitely others where it's so relationally driven.
Yep.
And it's so important to be plugged in to the network that you want to be working in and be involved with. My experience of getting started in that was that I really felt like there was a standard of behavior, even like the ways you talk, things you talk about, words you use, things you know, like,
yeah.
And that felt pretty exhausting. Although I didn't realize it at the time, I kind of just wrote it off as like, this is the price that I have to pay.
Yeah, this is your tax.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about the Enneagram on this podcast,
yeah,
but as a 4 through and through, I'm just sort of that just rubs me the wrong way. But at the same time, as like a strong 3-wing, I sort of know how to like get over it, get past it, and just like do what I have to do to achieve the end that I'm trying to. But what I discovered, I think, and I'm realizing, I've been thinking about this is I'm coming up on 10 years of full-time touring.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, in some ways it doesn't feel like a lot, but it's a long time. It's like almost a third of my life.
Yeah.
And I was way more anxious and worried about what everyone thought of me at the start than I feel like I am now. Maybe part of that is just the experience of getting to work with different artists and different people that work with those different artists and realizing there's a lot of room for individuality in the music industry. And I mean, I think in general, but there are certain things that work well in groups, like being nice, being on time, not being full of yourself, just general things that go well all the time. But things like, I don't know, mannerisms, the kind of humor you're into, the kind of like TV you're into, sports you're into or not into is my case. I'm one of those sports ball guys that's like, I'll watch the Super Bowl when the Seahawks play.
Yeah.
No, I'll watch the Super Bowl all the time, but
you're there for the halftime performance.
Just for the halftime performance and the snacks,
yeah.
really. I would like to change that. It's just not a high priority for me. So it's, more power to those who really are into it.
People that know every sport in their city are terrifying to me.
My parents and my sister, who all live in Seattle, they're like huge Seahawks fans. I don't know that they go to games that much, but they definitely keep up with the season and everything. And I just don't. I don't know. It's just one of those things that's like, I tend to focus on what I'm focused on to the exclusion of pretty much everything else. And maybe that's just a part of my personality or someone with like a highly distractible brain. I just tend to hyper focus on things.
Yeah. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I don't know that to like a point of like real negativity, but I've been like really kicking the shit on myself for a couple months in terms of like just things that I'm pondering about the kind of person I am, and being hyper focused on things is part of that. How do you feel about the like acumen that you reach in things that you tend to like focus on for a time? Like, do you ever feel like you get enough, I hate to use the trope, but maybe it's like the right trope of jack of all trades, like master of none kind of thing? Do you feel like when you like hyperfixate on things that you're interested in, that you like go all the way, or like until the next thing comes along that takes your focus?
I don't know. I think that for me, I definitely fall prey to the jack of all trades sort of temptation of like, I do tend to get interested in one thing for a little while and then maybe something else for a little while. And
same. I mean,
so kind of a dabbler. But
I guess the question is, are you comfortable dabbling?
I think it depends on what it is. But I'm also the kind of person, I mean, I guess perfectionist fits, but I feel like there is a standard that I'll never be able to attain in just about everything I do.
Yeah.
And I've actually been doing a lot of like reading/listening on this subject as of late, because it's something I'm hoping to change kind of this year and going forward, is like maybe letting go of the need to reach such a high level in certain things. And it's not that I think that striving for a high level of excellence is a bad thing.
No, not at all.
I think that's part of being human. That it definitely matters to me, but I also don't want to feel like I'm perpetually not good enough because I haven't beat everyone else in the field.
Sure.
And that's definitely a feeling I can fall prey to, especially around music, since it is like my career.
Yep.
It's easy to fall into the comparison trap. And really, I struggled with a lot of the old imposter syndrome when I got started in music, up to a point where that kind of changed overnight based on a conversation I had. I got started in touring because a friend kind of championed me in to like a really great gig playing with Maher.
Yeah.
And I felt like I got to skip a lot of like the hustle that a lot of people have to go through, like fan touring and, everything that comes with that. And, or like being in a band. Like I think about John Shaw and his Delta Saints days, and those stories are just incredible to me. Yeah. But I felt like I got to skip a lot of that, and almost didn't feel guilty about it. I just often thought like, do I belong here? What am I doing here? Like, did I pay my dues?
Yeah.
And I remember being at this event one night where another guitar player, Derek from a band Family Force 5, was there, and great guitar player. And I was just, I don't know if there was just like something about him that was just like very welcoming and disarming, but I kind of just like told him how much of an imposter I felt, like I didn't deserve the role or something like that. And he almost like snapped at me for saying that. And and I am so thankful that he responded this way, because it kind of like shook me out of it a little bit. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was essentially like, don't ever say again, that you don't deserve what, your position that you have. Like, you've worked so hard for it. You've earned it. So you deserve it. And he just kind of like walked away, and I still have never spoken to him since. This was like 8-9 years ago. But that
incredible.
Sticks with me of, okay, you're right. I can operate under that assumption. And as I have learned to grow into that, I've learned that there's a lot of different ways. It's not like there's one ladder that everyone climbs, and
Sure.
the higher up you are on it, the better you are than everyone who's below you. It's like, no, it's much more like 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 7-dimensional. Like, everyone brings different skills, different gifts to the table. And I've found my way into opportunities that have fit me well. And I'm very grateful for that. I have not been offered a lot of opportunities that probably would be a terrible fit for me.
Yeah.
And, they might have been fun. They might have paid well, whatever. But I'm glad I didn't get those, because that wouldn't have been a good fit for my particular personality and skill set.
Yeah. In some ways, and this is no diminishing, it's real hard to find a real good keyboard player. And so I think that sometimes there's such like a need for like very good keys playing that I can see a world in which you felt like getting opportunities was skipping over things, because you had I don't want to say previous life, because like that kind of thing doesn't end, but like in playing drums a lot, I think if you had been a dedicated drummer, you may have found a very different obstacle course to go through to end up in that same position.
And maybe so. And yeah, it could have been more of a slog, or I feel like I maybe lacked some of the knowledge and or motivation to do that. Like early on, I didn't play out a whole lot. Like after I graduated from Belmont, I took a job working at the Cheesecake Factory, waiting tables.
In your white pants.
In my white pants, white shirt. They don't do that anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you the last time I was in a Cheesecake Factory.
Katie and I, we went on Thanksgiving, I think, with our daughter. And we walked in there, and no, it was on Christmas Eve. That's right. Because we were there. I had an 18-day run on Christmas tour. So it was like we were trying to cram in all the Christmas stuff, like whenever we had time. But we went to the mall to take pictures with Santa, because it's like our daughter's one, and she had to have her first picture with Santa.
Time for that.
And I was like, oh, Cheesecake Factory. I secretly love the Cheesecake Factory. Even though I worked there for 2 years, I don't know. I feel like it just, they have some good food, and I can't eat the cheesecake anymore because dairy. But I was like, they're wearing black. They're dressed in black. They gave in. They caved. Or it was more probably like a mass protest. Like, we're all going to leave, and you're not going to have any servers if you keep making us find white pants to wear.
Is there a union now?
Cheesecake Union.
I would imagine that would be, if there were to be a Cheesecake Factory union, that would have been number one on the list of demands. Get us out of this all white serving outfit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was not fun. But yeah, I don't know how we got on to talking about the Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, you were talking about having not played out like a bunch, and then
my approach, and I'm not saying that I think there was any kind of correlation, but my approach was every night from the Cheesecake Factory, the walk from the restaurant to the garage where I parked, I was just praying, God, when am I going to have a full-time job in music? And, I was playing at church a lot, like every week.
Yep.
And that was kind of the way that I knew how to play out and network. And granted, with a very small circle of people.
Sure.
It turns out that, I ended up going from 2 years of doing that to working for a worship leader at the church that I went to for 2 years, being an in-house audio engineer, music producer, customer support specialist, a lot of different hats that I wore. Then a friend of mine heard me play, like I'd known him for a while, and it was like the spring of, I think, 2015, and he sort of sat me down and was like, hey, I might have this opportunity for you to play keys. And I was like, keys, that's not exactly what I was thinking of doing, but I'm all ears.
Yeah.
And that was the Matt Maher gig. I still remember where I was when I got the news that I had the gig. Out of like 7 or 8 people that were being considered for the spot is what I was told, all of whom I believe were like had decades of experience more than me and were, you know, all super professional and whatever. And I was this just like new guy. And somehow Matt was just like, yeah, I like this guy. Let's just go with him. Yeah. And I'm sure my friend just, you know, sold me to the moon. Yeah. I mean, I like bawled in my car from leaving work that day, driving home. I was just like, this doesn't feel real. Is this real? Like I get to do this. And it was just like almost like an overnight switch from doing what was a weird office job, doing audio engineering and a bunch of other things, to going on the road, playing 120 shows a year with this prominent on the radio like artist. I don't know. Like I've never really looked back on the playing drums thing, even though my major from Belmont was in playing drums. It was just like, that's not the path that was there for me. I just took the one that was, and here I am like almost 10 years later.
It's just so interesting because you are such a good keyboard player.
Oh, thank you.
That intuitive and someone that listens to what's going on around them, and at least in my experience, you know, and so just
only when you're around.
I'm saying I imagine that's true, but I also shouldn't speak to other situations. It's just so crazy to think that 10 years ago, you weren't concerned with playing keys. Yeah. You know, like, because I don't know this about you. Like, when did that, like, what is your history with playing keys? Yeah. In terms of that, like.
Well, it was my first instrument. Sure. My dad is primarily a keyboard player.
Okay. I didn't know that he was a musician.
Yeah. He was always the worship leader at our church. Cool. Continues to this day to lead worship at his church. Very dedicated in that way, but that was sort of my like role model for being a musician. So I took lessons from him, and then from my mom, who is also like, you know, she doesn't teach professionally, but she plays enough and knows enough that she taught me till I was like 10 or 11. So I studied for about 6 years just at home with my parents. Yeah. And then I took lessons from teachers for another 6 years. And it was just always kind of a thing that I did. And I actually, when I got into Belmont, I got in as a piano major, but I just had this change of heart after one semester that I was like, I want to play drums. I feel like I'm supposed to be playing drums. Don't really know why. The hurdle was basically that like my scholarship at Belmont was a piano scholarship. So I lose the piano major, I lose the money. And I don't know if I think I did mean this when I said it, but I told my advisor like that if I can't play drums, I don't know that I'm going to stay at Belmont. And I guess I haggled my way into keeping the piano scholarship, even though I changed instruments. Now, I don't know. I probably signed an NDA somewhere. I wasn't supposed to say that. I don't know. Yeah, well, I don't think I did.
I'm sure the statute of limitations has run out at this point.
If you're a Belmont student and you're listening to this, don't go threaten your advisor with leaving the school. I don't recommend that.
I don't know. Belmont's a much bigger college than Berkeley is. So, you know, there's a lot more people on spreadsheets as points of impact, but like, it must speak to something that was going on with you that Belmont, whatever arm of Belmont was overseeing that, thought was worthwhile, you know, for you to continue being a student. I would imagine that you were a pretty good student. You seem like the kind of person that would have been a pretty good, like,
I would hope so,
on top of your stuff student.
Yeah, I definitely got good grades.
Yeah, that helps. You know. Yeah,
I don't know that I could tell you much from my like commercial music history class. I kind of regret that, and that's another topic. But
but that's what I mean. Sort of is like the fact that if you were a B- student and you threatened that way, you know, that there were factors going into why they were like, oh, we should keep this appealing student around.
I hope that's true. Because, I mean, I really, like, I cared about it a lot. Yeah. Although I do think it's funny. I had some credits transfer in from high school. And so I ended up having some holes in my schedule later on in my junior and senior years. And it was sort of like, well, I'm paying to be a full-time student and I still have 6 hours to fill. So what do I want to do? And I ended up taking audio engineering classes that weren't technically part of the major. Yeah. They didn't even go towards an elective credit. Those were already taken care of. It was just like, I'm doing this just to learn it.
Yeah.
And
you had to stay full time, you know?
Yeah. those classes, the audio classes at the Belmont Studios, at RCA Studio B, did one at Ocean Way with Bill Vorndick. Those were some of the most valuable educational experiences, like that I think served me to this day as like someone who's produced music, recorded music, played on records. It just, to know that stuff, to have the background of like working with a tape machine, working with a large desk console, not just doing everything in the box, was really valuable to me. And it's the part of my education that wasn't required at all.
Sure. Yeah. I wish I had done more of that. Also, though, to go back to a little bit of the thing about trends and, you get to learn what this keyboard, virtual instrument sounds like because it's on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Belmont, having never set foot in a Belmont classroom, I can tell that their connection to the recording process is much greater than, I hope that it's changed at Berklee, than what they're doing there. I mean, in 2005, which is funny because now this is valuable again, they were still making recording students do the first couple projects on tape.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2005, that was what we would call useless.
Right. Because everyone's recording to Pro Tools.
To Pro Tools at that time. Now, taking some tape classes there now is probably very appealing, but
Sure.
at the time, no. And maybe they haven't even gotten back there yet. I haven't, really kept up with that. But yeah, I wish that I had some more of that at that time instead of like cobbling stuff together in the past, like 5 to 7 years since I started producing stuff and realizing like, oh, I'm going to need to engineer a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'm just guessing, but like, yeah, I wish I had some of that stuff. Do you know that the first person I ever talked to for any podcast and it never got published was Bill Vorndick?
No way.
Yeah.
How did you make that connection?
My buddy Bruce Dees is super good friends with him, has been friends with him forever. Bruce is a much older guy. Bruce is probably 75 now. He played on all the Ronnie Millsap stuff. He played guitar on like tons of that. So that's like his era of town. But yeah, like Bill's like someone that he would have just been seeing at sessions all the time then. And when we were starting to do that podcast, he was like, yeah, should have you talk to Bill Vorndick? And I don't have that audio and I probably don't ever want to hear it because I think that I probably did that like a very mushy disservice. Like I could have done a lot better with that probably. And I don't know that that's the reason why I didn't have a podcast then and I do now. Because I think I know differently how to approach. For a long time, it was about being like, I don't know what I have to say in a podcast, and then realizing like, oh no, it's about what I have to ask. Like,
yeah. So this was before Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know.
Yeah, this is 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
That's amazing.
Whatever I got out of him in that was probably relatively valuable.
Yeah.
But, what I was going to say is, because I was going to self-burn for a second there, that when I had those same electives open at the end of my time at Berklee, I took a bunch of classes about classical music. I don't know why. It was just something I was really into, and I could go. I mean, I know why. At the time, the highest paid professor at Berklee was this guy, Dennis LeClaire, who taught music history. He's still there, but like everybody had to take music history, and music history sucks, like as a class. And
like you're talking about like Baroque, classical,
just the history of music that you have to have an accredited music degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like the highest paid professor because he was very good at it. And funny enough, I don't know that I took either of the like real music history classes with him. Maybe I did. Maybe I took the second one with him. But anyway, he taught an entire class on Stravinsky. And so like I took that class mostly just because I wanted to hear him talk more. Like, I believed in like what he was selling in terms of like analysis of classical music world. And so I wanted more of that, which is kind of how I did all of college. Berklee did this weird thing where they would say to prospective people, it's like, you can change your private instructor every semester and get all this variety. And then realizing like, well, lessons are a half hour a week. A semester is 15 weeks long. So I'm going to get less than 8 hours total of instruction with one person. No, I want to take this instruction with the same person for as long as I can.
Yeah.
Because it won't be until 2/3 of the way through something that I'll even start to like have them understand what I need or what they can offer me and things like that. And so I did that in all kinds of spaces. But yeah, the classical music thing at the end was probably a little foolhardy.
Well, maybe, but it's interesting to think about taking a class simply because the professor teaching that class is someone that you resonate with.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely a valid way to go about any kind of learning.
Sure. Well, I mean, arts education at its purest is apprenticeship. That is so. I guess musicians still sort of fall into like the merchant and arts class if you want to get very Renaissance-y about it. And what do you do with all of those things? You go just learn from a master. You apprentice, and that's how you do it. And so I tried to take that approach, I think, in with like 4 or 5 different people. I would say that the majority of my schedule was dominated in my entire time by like the same 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Like professors.
I like that.
Yeah. But that's, I guess, sort of another, we're having this entire discussion based on what I asked you sort of about going down rabbit holes and knowing whether or not you'll ever know and imposter syndromes and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we started this. And I was asking because I oscillate between feeling like I'll never know enough about something to really present on it in a way, like as an adult. You mentioned this. Apparently that is like one of the Enneagram 5 things, which I'm a 5 through and through. I don't even think I have a wing. I think it's just like
5 wing 5 wing 5.
5 wing 5. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that my therapist is married to someone allegedly who is a 5. I say allegedly because obviously I can't know that. But she will say that she's married to someone who's a 5. And so I think that has been very helpful over the course. But she will say like that.
What if she just tells all of her clients that she's married to someone who is their number just to gain the rapport?
That would be great. I mean, I'm
not trying to like
if she could
throw a wrench into your world here.
But if I would respect it if she made it work.
Yeah. But let's proceed assuming that she's telling the truth.
Sure. Yeah.
She's actually married to a 5.
Yeah. But she will say that fear of never knowing enough about something is like a big part of, or like the negative side of being a 5.
Yeah.
And the fact that I am so prone to being like, I'm going to be into this thing for the next 3.5 months, and then move on to something else and get to 60%, if even that, of the next subject is like, is that okay?
Yeah, but I think that kind of falls under the heading of not everyone has to do everything the same way.
Yeah.
Like your professor at Berkeley who taught music history, I would imagine he's poured pretty much all of his research and time into music history
of course,
to get that good.
Yep.
But it's like, you're not trying to be a music history professor.
No, of
so
course
you don't
not.
have to do the same thing. And when I think about your kind of propensity to learn things and gather knowledge, the ability that you have to make connections between seemingly unrelated topics is in and of itself, even though you might not spend years on the same topic, all of the years you're spending learning things is still moving you in this one direction of like being able to sort of be someone who's able to make connections.
That's a great observation because I do that all the time. I did it before we came in here. I forget what I was saying. We were talking about coffee and I used some like comparison point of like something entirely unrelated to make it, oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I will sleep slightly sounder this evening because of that.
Well,
hey, bully.
Glad to help. Yeah. I mean, I think that, I don't know. I guess I just get bored with stuff and I don't know. It seems like maybe that's a weakness, but at the same time, I feel like I have what I need when I need it.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say that I've been really starting to get on this feeling of certainty being the enemy, which has come from watching a lot of really intricate theology discourses. Has been about that, about like the idea of that like certainty is bad because if you're certain, then you're inflexible. And so I think that there's a lot in there about hopefully being able to release certainty and be like, well, I only know this much. Like it's a large chunk, but obviously I'm open to being wrong.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I feel like that attitude if everyone had that attitude, the world would be a friendlier place.
I mean, I would hope so. I think the problem I have as it goes, though, is I still feel silly when I realize, like, oh, I thought I had a handle on this thing. And then, like, there's some big component revealed to me. And it's like, oh, how did I not know that? I have that problem still. And that's I don't know, it's a process. That's the other thing, too, is like, I've also really been into this notion of like, most things are a lifetime. And maybe it has something to do with social media or the modern landscape or whatever, that like, if you can't be certain about something based on 2 sentences you read on top of an image on Instagram, then like, that's not good enough. And, you know, that's a bad way to live, but trying to be like okay with the notion that some things are a journey and like, you've got all the time in the world to figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's security in feeling like you have a certain understanding of certain things.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I've changed a lot of what I think and believe over the course of my adult life, based on things that have happened to me, based on things that have happened in the world, just also based on just getting older and seeing things differently. So yeah, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I find security in knowing what I care about and knowing like who I care about and who cares about me. And I don't really know where I'm going with this.
That's fine.
I just feel like that's
no, you're great.
I'm just trying to find like where do I fit in that picture of like not knowing things for certain. A lot's changed in my life in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're coming up on 5 years of meeting my wife for the first time at a bar here in Nashville.
Yep.
And in those 5 years.
For casual dating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another story altogether.
We'll leave that as it is.
We'll just
it's an all-time funny story.
Yeah, my naivety as a person led me to believe that the words something casual on a dating app literally just meant something casual.
Yeah, I don't know.
Casual.
We'll see what happens.
Casual date, a casual drink, a casual dinner. That's who I am, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, I think of that story often enough, but I will say that there's a great story about the first time that Amanda was introduced as my girlfriend, like in her earshot. And it perplexed her because she was like, wait, I'm your girlfriend? And I was like...
Wait, so when you say she was introduced as your girlfriend, were you the one introducing her or was that someone else?
You know, it could be either. I cannot recall. She probably would recall if it was me or my friend Leslie. But the point being that I said, yeah, we are currently at a large house with 20 people for a friend's 40th birthday. 3 months after we started dating, you don't think you're my girlfriend? And I have been lampooned endlessly for the modern dating landscape of being like, no, you have to say it. Like, it's like you have to say that someone is your girlfriend for it to be true. And it's like, oh, okay. Because women apparently deal with that, you know, a lot. I shouldn't say apparently, like I'm convinced, there is no doubt now in my mind about this, but that is like a thing women deal with in the modern dating landscape, is like not having things be official or like what's going on. And it's like, I don't know, I thought we had a discussion about being exclusive or like that I wasn't going to date anyone else. Does that not make, you know, but anyway, so for your naivete casual story, that is something that I was stung with a few months into me and Amanda's relationship, and I was like, okay, cool. I guess I
could tell a few stories about my early dating relationship with Katie that would be embarrassingly laughable.
Sure.
But I have gained a lot of confidence since then. I've also, I've gained a wife, a house, an Airbnb that we run out of that house, and a little baby girl who's now a little over 1.
Yep.
Somehow finding myself full circle playing keys for Michael W. Smith,
Yeah.
who is another artist that I listen to on the radio all the time. And it's funny, I meant to tie this together earlier when we were talking about Steven.
Yeah.
That there.
Well, I knew we would talk about Michael.
Yeah.
At some, what I guess could be described as length, so I was going to wait on it, but yeah.
Michael and Steven are on the same management. So I'm actually surprised that we haven't crossed paths yet in that capacity. But we were actually supposed to. There was supposed to be an Israel tour, and that was planned 6 months after the violence broke out, and so that hit the can pretty quickly. But maybe one day, maybe we'll get to do something together.
Circle around again.
But anyways, the Michael thing kind of came out of the blue too, just like the Matt Maher thing did, and actually there's a lot of similarities in how those two things.
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
came about.
having now heard you describe getting into the Matt Maher thing and then knowing some more, which I'll ask you to explain, but some more about the Michael W. Smith situation. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like this is just how you are and the way people see you.
Yeah. Well, Jim Daneker, who's his previous keyboard player and a legend in his own right.
I've been there forever. Yeah,
almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, when he started playing with Michael W. Smith, I was 6 years old. So there's that. But I had been following him on Instagram, because like keyboard players follow each other. And
because you're tribal. See, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, there's very few of you that are very good, and so like
we got to stick together. Yeah. But we messaged once or twice about different things that he'd posted, synth stuff, pretty much. If you had told me in like 2018, 2019 that guy's gonna text you and ask you if you want to play with Michael W. Smith, I'd been like, nah. No way. He's there forever. But that is exactly what happened. I got a text from him early January, a couple of years ago, about this time actually of year. And basically it was through a couple other guys that are in the band had just recommended me as a potential replacement just because they'd worked with me in different capacities. One of them was Chris, who I mentioned earlier. And then James Gregory, who's a mutual friend. We'd also worked together on like some recording sync stuff. So yeah, it was just kind of one of those, this is kind of the sum amalgamation of my spending time doing things here in Nashville and like meeting people and just being on the right place at the right time. And it almost makes me look back and realize like it is kind of at the risk of making it seem less glamorous than it, really is. It's a numbers game. It's literally just like how much time can you put in, how many friends can you make? Not that it's like you're trying to be popular, but it's like, it's just like the more people that know you do good work and that know you're kind and a pleasant person. And, maybe you're funny, maybe you're whatever, you're a nice person to be around. The chances of your finding your way to where you want to go skyrocket. And
I am terrible at most of those things.
Yeah, well, I feel like I am too, but it's just, I think it goes back to what I've learned is like, I don't have to be good at everything.
No, of course.
I don't have to exceed in every personality category that there is.
It's like picking, dude, for the next 2 weeks, every time I make a comparison like this, I'm going to think of you because of the thing you just said. But I have often described this thing that you're talking about as picking a cart in Mario Kart. You obviously can't have like maxed out stats on every cart. Like, you have to pick what things are the way that you're going to drive that cart throughout the game. And that's what makes you pick a cart. Like, you can't just have it, maxed out every way.
Well, now I'm going to just Mario Kart my way through the rest of life. Yeah, that makes total sense. I appreciate that metaphor. Now looking back, there's been some fun like full circle moments because one of the earliest Christmas records I ever listened to was Michael's original Christmas record, the 1989 one.
The
year I was born.
Yeah, you are, and growing up in that environment, like you are prime aged for like the first prime era of like Michael's stuff.
I technically kind of missed the first prime era because it was like early to mid 80s.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
When he started, and then like his the Big Picture record, Eye to Eye record, which had Secret Ambition on it, Change Your World. Those are all like kind of before my time. Change Your World is 92. Right. So really like the first sort of non-Christmas albums of his that I got into were like This Is Your Time and Live the Life, like the 98, 99 kind of arena, when I was like old enough to start caring about music and artists and stuff like that. But Christmas music is different.
Sure.
And my parents played a lot of it.
Yeah.
And Michael's album was in like heavy rotation every year. So, and like my dad putting together a Christmas program at our church every year, Gloria was always in it with the keyboard part and everything.
And at church, no matter what denomination, from Catholic to Our Lady of Anything Goes, those people love having the same stuff happen on Christmas. No matter what church it is, there's something about being like, well, you got to do that song. When the right people in a church latch on to a couple songs, they're never going away.
That's absolutely right. I mean, what better time to have rituals and, things to make us feel comfortable and warm and fuzzy inside. And for me, that was da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. And I remember watching my dad learn that. I remember teaching myself that on the piano. And so then like the first Christmas tour, which I did last, in 23, was like pretty surreal experience, because I'm like playing that part on, like a TX Yamaha sound, and then I'm looking down stage and there's the guy who wrote it. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Yeah. So
I don't want to get too far before I make this last point about stuff we were just talking about. I think about how often I say to people in situations like, a person is only the sum of their like experiences up to this point. Those are the only things that really inform like what person you are now. And I think about, you were saying about like things that you had done that prepared you to be in situations you were in. And I think about that way about the circumstances in which I joined, the Sara Evans band. I got to learn all this like music overnight. And had I not played in a ton of bands that had a ton of material that would call any cover song, like learning how to ingest things quickly made that a success. Like without that, I would have never survived. That is, again, like a long gestation period of playing in tons of those bands and being like, okay, I have to put these skills to use right now for like possibly the highest return to date, of that quickness kind of thing. And it's all the same kind of stuff. How much of Michael's stuff did you feel like you had a handle on when you started prepping for the gig? Was there anything?
Oh, for sure. So the thing about Michael's music is,
well, I guess you're not playing his parts necessarily, which are like things that you'd be thinking of primarily.
Right.
That's a wrinkle I wasn't thinking about.
Michael's playing piano for most of the night, with the exception of a few songs where he just has like a downstage microphone and a few songs where he actually plays like acoustic guitar. But the thing about his career that's helpful to understand is like around the year 2001, he kind of made this switch to like worship music. Yeah. And it's almost like a hard dividing line to where everything before that was sort of like pop CCM.
I mean, he made the entire industry change into that.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that, like, and the way he tells the story, he kind of like felt like it was something God told him to do, is like make a worship record. And he said, he told God, it's going to be the worst selling record of my entire career. And I think it might be his top selling album of all time.
I, without looking into it and being open to being wrong, I would put money on that being the truth. Yeah, he tells that story in that Jesus music documentary.
So all of the worship stuff is songs that I grew up singing in church.
Sure, of course.
So that was all familiar to me. The tricky part was actually with those songs. Michael, he's known for the phrase, I've got a wild idea. And usually anytime we hear that, we know that we're changing a chord progression or we're pulling a song out of the archives or anything like that. So a lot of these songs like Awesome God that the Rich Mullins thing that we play, or, the Draw Me Close, the Open the Eyes of My Heart, have wildly different arrangements and chord progressions than I had been used to playing and hearing. Yeah. So the first gig that was in Vietnam, of all places, I have charts that I'm like sneakily looking down at because I'm like just trying to keep straight, like, when does it do what I think it's going to do? And when does it, when does the bass pedal over a 1 for 16 bars when it doesn't normally do that? And so that was trickier, honestly, than going back and learning some of his or like older pop stuff, like from the Change Your World record and like Secret Ambition, which those songs are just wildly fun to play.
Oh, sure,
as a keyboard player.
I mean, as anything, like that's an era of music, whether it's sacred music or not. It's an era where people had a lot more tracks to work with in recording.
Yep.
And a lot more ways to program stuff to go onto those tracks.
And we used them all.
Used them all.
Yeah, I going back to what you said a little earlier of how you felt like your experience having to learn music really fast sort of prepared you for the conundrum you found where you literally had to learn overnight.
Which, by the way, I thought I would mention this and then it got away from me and I wasn't concerned about saying it, but I also, in the discussion about saying like knowing you were a real one when I watched you meet Stephen Curtis Chapman and like tell him the business, is that you were the first person that stayed up for a while on the bus with me.
Oh yeah.
When we like left that night, like everybody kind of peeled off to bed because it was a late bus call. People hung out for a while, but like you stayed and like we talked for like a while and stuff like that. And that was sort of in a world of not knowing anybody at all involved in the situation of being like, oh, well, this helps it be more calming, like finding like just little bits of personal anchor when you have nothing in that. So like,
oh man,
that was a very like valuable moment in time. So,
well, I'm
whether
glad
you
that
did
happened.
it on purpose or not.
No, I mean, I'm trying to remember. It's all kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But I mean, was John up there hanging out with us or?
I mean, for a little bit, yeah. And he went to bed, but that is when I met John too, because they called like 30 people before they found somebody that could go.
Yeah, that's right.
Which makes it even crazier and is like such a nice career affirmation in that instance that, I talked with Matt Evans at John's wedding about this a little bit, and the things that I like found out like later to be true are true. But like in that moment, that gig really wasn't available, and to be like, okay, I'm going to come in out of nowhere, like last on the list with no personal connection and like manage to stay for 2 years, 2 full years of touring is like a worthy flex.
Yeah.
We will say.
Do you, am I allowed to ask you questions? You're the host.
Yeah.
Do you look at stuff like that happens, like scenarios where it seems like the stars kind of aligned? Like it'd be highly unlikely that what happened would lead to, you spending the time that you did on the road. Do you look at that as like, is it planned? Was it supposed to be? Was there some sort of divine intervention? Was it literally just sort of the stars aligned?
I want to say yes. I've never thought of it quite that way, per se, but I've told that story enough times in different ways, all the way from like telling Berkeley like bass students, this is a thing that happened to me. And like, I think in those instances, I was telling it in terms of being like, I took charge of that, even though there were definitely factors that I had no direct control of in terms of like making the situation progress. But I think like there's some autonomy there. The reason I want to sort of say yes to your question is because what I was saying is I've been over it a number of times, like in a detailed manner, and thinking like, that's a lot of stuff to go right, in succession.
Yeah.
That it's hard to say that it's not something like that. But I can see an argument for that, like if I put it that way. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was just curious because like I have a hard time not thinking that about certain parts of my story, and not the whole thing. Yeah. And I have talked to like quite a few other, friends in music that sort of describe a similar feeling of like my being where I am was not all up to me. Like not to diminish the effect of working hard and, putting in your dues and all the things that it takes to create a career in the music industry. But it's like getting to the right place at the right time. It's not always something that I feel like I know how to do.
Well, yeah, I believe in that statement that luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
That's really the thing that I was saying in terms of like feeling a sense of autonomy about that situation is I, again, was well prepared to figure out how to make 15 songs, because there were 3 of those songs that I had played endlessly before. To do that overnight, and like be probably 60 to 70% correct, in actually playing them for the first time. But that's years of preparation and then an opportunity. And so like it feels very lucky to end up doing that, and many a thing that has like come out of it. That's really the thing that you never want, if we're going to actually talk about professional musicianing here, so to some degree, is that I think that often in a world where like everybody kind of wishes that they could just find the right gig and do it forever. And anytime you don't do that feels like a disappointment, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think they're only disappointments if nothing comes of it. If there is no spin-off, if it's just like, this is a thing that happened for not even like a sub situation, but like an appreciable amount of time. If it goes away and you don't get to take anything from it into the next part, of what you're doing, then, that's where disappointment happens. The one thing that every musician learns long term is that like gigs end.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like that's just how it is. And you have to be like thick to that without being jaded. But I think that a mark of maturity is finding a situation where you are, like I said, taking something into the next phase.
Yeah.
So
I saw that kind of happen with each sort of progressive like gig change.
Yeah.
I guess it sort of felt like I started playing with Maher after playing, keyboards in church my whole life.
Yeah.
So the skills, because Matt he's a great songwriter, great performer. He's a worship leader at heart, and there were just a lot of moments where I knew what to do, where another keyboard player without the church experience that I have might not know what to do in those, or might not be able to, or be as comfortable with kind of rolling with the punches in those scenarios, because it's a lot of like spontaneous kind of audibles being called and things.
Like I said, but my impression of you playing is as being someone that is listening to what's going on around them. Yeah.
Oh, and I guess that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
But like on that gig, I learned technology. Like I learned how to like use main stage. I learned how to kind of become solid at that part of the gig. Yeah. And I carried that forward into working with Jason Crabb for a little bit, where I like kind of ran tracks and ended up like doing a bunch of crew stuff over there anyway.
Yeah.
And then on that gig is where I learned to play like gospel, which is where it sounds funny that I learned to play gospel on Jason Crabb, but I really I had to put in some work up front to be able to hack it over there. And those are skills that I took into playing with Sara, where I met you, and being able to have the vocabulary that I needed for like those songs, some of the solos, etc. Like I wouldn't have had that had I not had the opportunity to play with Jason for the short time that I did.
Yeah.
And moving forward, like now playing with Michael, surprisingly enough, there are moments where I pull what I've learned playing with Sara, playing organ primarily, like, because I didn't think I would be playing as much organ on the Smitty gig as I do.
Yeah.
But it's like half the show.
Sure.
Or more.
Well, he's playing piano the majority of it. That's what I was saying. Like, it occurred to me in asking you that question before in real time of being about preparation, then realizing like, oh, the things that you would have learned before knowing that you'd be on the gig are not are the parts that are already covered.
Right. Exactly. And so now, it's stuff that I did a lot. I also like to joke that I think God puts me with playing music for keyboard players who are better players than me, just to like keep me in my place. Sure. It's like, those parts, they're already taken care of. You can just hold down the pad, but like the organ isn't featured like a lot in Michael's music, but it just works for live. Yeah. It just brings a lot of energy live.
But that texture, that's the thing about ancillary keys parts though, right? Is like when YouTube first became such a big thing and you could start watching videos of people breaking down tracks, and then you start to realize like how many like pads and organ parts and things that are like buried in mixes. Like you'd never know they were there at all. But they also have to be right. Like those parts are the ones that like require so much fine tuning to be like, oh no, it has to be like quite right, you know?
For sure. It's one of those things that falls into the category of things you only notice when it's wrong.
Yeah, right.
And like when it's doing its job, it just sounds like good music, and you don't realize that it might be because of a specific, you know, keyboard part or guitar part or bass part. That's just right where it needs to be.
It's that way in the intro to this show. The organ part, like the pad organ part that you played for the intro, there was a discussion in mix about like how necessary it was, like especially because I try and think about the mix in things I produce, but I am also very like, I'll build something out. I would rather get to that point, you know, and find parts hopefully that are available to be taken away without problem, instead of being in mix and going, you know what, it needs this.
Yeah.
So am I going to go, I don't ever want to be working on something and have to go like leave mix, go, well, we're not doing this anymore because I have to go back and add like a thing. But all that to say, like that organ pad was the kind of thing where it's like, well, does it really need to be there? Because now that like things are being like EQ'd and placed in the right spot, there's not holes the way that I was thinking of. And ultimately it is still there, but it lives in that way of being like something that's just not necessarily like a focal.
Yeah, I think like there's got to be some generic principle about creative work where you begin by gathering way more than you will ever need, and then you just cut away. You know, it reminds me of that stereotypical quote from Michelangelo where he cut away everything that wasn't David.
Oh yeah,
out of the slab.
Yeah, that he saw it in the block.
Yeah. So maybe that sort of kind of falls under the same heading there.
Yeah, I suppose. You still having fun playing, Michael?
Oh yeah,
great. Still,
one aspect that is really fun is the international touring.
Sure. Yeah.
Because most Nashville-based artists don't do that much international stuff.
Not at all.
It's like, you know, there's the C2C festival in England. There's Europe stuff that happens every once in a while, but it's like Michael's at the point where his international booking agency can basically put him wherever he wants to go. Yeah, he
could only do international dates. Mm-hmm. He's like a Texas country artist where it's like a lot of those people think. I remember hearing the Texas country artist Wade Bowen say that once. He's like, you know, we can just work in Texas all the time.
Yeah.
And like never have to go anywhere else. Yeah. Michael could easily just be like, yep, I'm just going to be in Europe.
Yeah.
Or not quite just Europe, but just like international for a year and never touch, you know, a gig stateside.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And the funny thing about those, the audiences overseas, they're really into the worship stuff.
Yeah.
They really don't seem to care about the pop stuff that
really
much. Yeah. It's just not that they don't, not that it's like, they think it's bad. It's just that they don't know him for that. Like,
yeah, right.
They know him for singing Agnus Dei.
Yeah.
So,
I used to work for a hymnal company and the doing sheet music editing, and the guy who was like the head sheet music editor used to call worship songs 7-11 songs, 7 words sung 11 times.
I like that. I've never heard that.
Yeah. And, you know, say what you want about things like that if you are someone who is prone to say anything about that kind of thing, but it transcends barriers of complexity.
Sure.
You know, like simplicity goes a long way when there's a language barrier and cultural barriers. You know, like that kind of music does much better on that scale than you know, anything popular would.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I really enjoy that aspect of it because I think traveling internationally is really fun.
Yeah.
It's just a huge honor. Like, I mean, Michael he's been an artist for over 40 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just like I don't know how long
Sure, of course.
I'll
Yeah,
get to do this,
of course.
but like you were saying, gigs end.
Yeah. Does he still seem pretty excited to be doing what he's doing?
He does.
Great.
Every time that it comes up, he's just like, guys, I'm just so excited to be doing this. I'm so grateful we still get to do this.
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem like he wants to slow down anytime soon, at least to me. So
He's also smart. I mean, like he does 5 different versions of a show at any one time in his tour schedule.
Mhm.
So like he's very much keeping it fresh for himself, just in like versions of presentation as well. And I think that probably helps.
And we reimagine 2 or 3 songs like every tour cycle.
Yeah.
So it's like this last one we did like a cinematic version of Awesome God.
Oh, that's cool.
So just, because that one's been around for a while.
Of course.
It sort of needs to be jostled up a little bit in order to keep it fresh. But
though sometimes when you listen to that Rich Mullins version, it goes hard.
Oh yeah.
For its time and place.
That'll never lose its effect. That's for sure.
I think that is sort of like something that Chris Thiele found to like unlock is by just like rotating projects around like a multi-year cycle. You'll never get bored enough of one. Like you'll always kind of like pine to do something with one too. And I think that's sort of what Michael kind of like does.
Yeah, that's clever. And I wonder if that plays into what we were talking about earlier with sort of dabbling in different things and never spending all your time on one thing necessarily. I don't know if it has anything to do with ADHD. I know a lot of artists are supposed to have ADHD. Yeah. I do wonder if it's like maybe there's kind of like a group of us creative people who just need something new and different all the time. and that's we all find our own ways to do that and still sort of bring excellence into our everyday.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think that musicians who are only into music, shred guitar guys are the kinds of, no shade on shred guitar guys, but like who tend to be like some of the cleanest and most efficient musicians out there. But it's like, those are also the people that only ever watch shred guitar YouTube videos, and I find so much more compelling by people I know who like read poetry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and one of the few things that I take away from my music history class in college was just being impressed by how many composers were not just composers. Like Felix Mendelssohn was a math teacher.
Yeah.
There were many composers who worked in other art mediums as well, like poetry or literature or visual art or whatever. And it's just like they didn't feel a need to confine themselves to one artistic expression because that was in them. Whether it was like they just wanted to do other things like because they got bored, or just because they're just like a creative person who is known for their music, but they're just not restricting their identity to like a composer, Yeah,
for sure. I think that a lot of the stuff we've been talking about that are things that I've been thinking about lately were spurred on by, if you haven't seen it yet, the Ken Burns Da Vinci documentary.
No, I've not.
It's brand new. It's only been out for like a month, but I watched it when it came out, and that, he's the guy for that. Painting is like a very small part of his output. And like sketching is probably the most prolific art that he ever did, and so that he was kind of all over the place, like that there were things about the human body because he was like dissection, trying to like figure out, he would like run water with dye through like human hearts and like see like our understanding of how the heart works is because Da Vinci like was doing dissections. Yet also the Mona Lisa is the greatest painting, that anyone's ever seen, or, the most popular painting in the history of the world.
It would almost be like if Neil deGrasse Tyson decided to record a pop song and it went like it got 100 million streams or something like that.
Listen, if Neil deGrasse Tyson actually recorded a pop song, it would get 100,000 streams or a million streams, because how absurd would that be?
It would start out as just pure curiosity of like, what is this super smart astrophysicist doing in the music business, and go from there.
But he'd probably get a good song.
Oh yeah,
like he'd get a good writer to do something, and then all of a sudden Neil deGrasse Tyson would be on SNL in like an Earth, Wind, and Fire full spandex bodysuit, dancing around and singing.
Oh man, I just imagine him covering "Levitating" by Dua Lipa, except it would actually be like scientifically accurate, like references
That's a
to
very
planetary bodies.
It's a very Sesame Street way of approaching that topic, but it would totally work.
Yeah.
Well,
I feel like, has Neil deGrasse Tyson been on Sesame Street or like a kid's show?
he has to have been by now.
Yeah. I don't know.
I should see, but
look that up.
I feel like he'd be either great at it or terrible.
Yeah.
At being on a children's show.
Yeah. We'd have to see it to know for sure.
Cool. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. See ya. My thanks to Aaron Smith for coming over and hanging out with me and having that great discussion. Thanks to you for hanging out and listening this time, every time, some of the times, whatever you're doing, it is helpful and it is supportive. You can follow the show on Instagram at Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. You can follow me at Matt O'Donnell. I just jumped onto Blue Sky. I mean, that's not exactly true. I've been kind of lurking there for a while, as a lot of my favorite news people have sort of migrated in that direction. But I am doing a combo page over there. I didn't know that I had the wherewithal to start 2 pages up there. So you'll get me and you'll get the show. But that is Matt O'Donnell. I should be pretty easy to find. Questions, comments, concerns, love letters. Valentine's Day is coming up, folks. Can be sent to Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know at gmail.com. Still running free sticker offers there for the show. Just send me an email with your address and I will get one out to you. It's that simple. It's really that simple. Be sure that you and your family and friends and next door neighbors and their next door neighbors, don't go another one than that. Just, your neighbor, their next door neighbor. Like, subscribe, share, rate. Do all the things that you can do to make this happen. We're doing it this year. We're growing. We're pushing through. We are storming the gates. That's going to do it for this time. Right about here, you are going to hear the sweet sounds of Aaron Smith. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the best answer to a question is usually another question. See ya.